What is the CV? The CV is the story of your academic life as opposed to a resume, which is the story of your professional life. Okay. And depending on what content you put into the CV, it can show that you are, that you know what belongs or how to belong in your discipline. So in terms of the categories you use, such as maybe awards or education, how you organize the different categories and the tone, all of those show that you are a member of your discipline. And I found this quote that I really liked in the Chronicle of Higher Education, that the CV is your calling card, and I should have probably boldfaced, in the academic community. And it's going to be read not just for your achievements, but also for the way you present your record. Okay. So I know there's always question about CVs versus resumes. As I just said, you know, resumes are going to be the story of your professional life. And in the US, we do differentiate between the two kinds of documents, even though they do have many similarities. For a CV, you're going to use it for academic job applications, fellowships, perhaps grants. Maybe you're applying for a position in a research institute. The resume is what you will use if you are applying for a job in industry. Okay. So the CV can be much longer, depending on, you know, what your background is. Contents, well, there'll be some differences. For instance, a resume has an objective statement, but a CV doesn't. And then, you know, your goal is different. With the CV, you're trying to establish yourself as someone who has a strong academic background. All right, what are the major CV problems? Typos and misspellings, because if you have them on there, someone reading it is likely to think that you have not taken the time to or put in the effort to correct your CV. So please make sure you don't have either. You know, spell check is good as far as it goes, but it will not catch when it's a correct English word, but you've used it in the wrong context. And I would say probably you should look over it, and you should get other people to look at it as well, because I know what happens for me when I look at something I've written too many times. I don't see the errors. So do yourself a favor whenever you have to submit any kind of writing, whether it's a CV or anything, put it aside for a while, give it to somebody else or several people to look at. Okay. Inconsistencies. So you only need one font, okay, and style. And, you know, you should be using the same font size for the different sections. The only time it's going to be larger would be in a heading. Otherwise, the content under that should all be consistent as well. Spacing. So what I mean is in terms of spacing between words, vertical spacing, making sure that you don't add vertical spaces where you don't need them, and inconsistent use of punctuation. Okay, so one place where I see problems with that would be, like, this is a list of bullet points. None of those bullet points is a complete sentence, so none of them needs a period at the end of the line. So that's an example. Inappropriate personal information, too much unnecessary content. So maybe you think that, oh, my CV is too short, and you start padding it, throwing in information that doesn't need to be there. Don't do that. On the other hand, a cluttered appearance. That's when it's really hard to read the CV and differentiate between the different categories of content. And I'll show you some tricks for that when we get there. An unimpressive CV, okay, and too little content. In some ways, those work together. Unimpressive, this is something you can work on. You can figure out with your advisor, oh, I can't get that to go, what you need to have on your CV to meet the goal that you're looking for. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. And too little content, again, this is something you can work on, and especially if you have time while you're still in graduate school. All right, so in terms of organization, basically you go from most important to least important. And that can vary somewhat depending on what kind of position you're applying for. So for instance, if you want to teach at a teaching focused university, you probably would reverse the order of research and teaching, where I have them down on the left side of the slide, because the teaching university or teaching focused university will be more concerned with your teaching experience than maybe with your research. If you're applying to an R1, like a Research 1 university like Purdue, research is definitely more important, okay? And as you look at other people's CVs, it'll be very interesting to see what kind of order they select. And for that, I wanted to show you a couple of examples. This is from a professor in ABE, and I realize it's probably a year or two old, but I went through her CV and picked out her categories. And I don't know that she's changed her categories, the order of her categories, but these are what she had in there. She had her education, she had work experience next, awards and honors, publications. Well, you can see, here's another one for Professor Garner in nuclear. And he started with his education, and then he had a professional experience section with his research experience. And within that, he put the publications, he put his grants that he'd received, RA employment when he was a graduate student, and special training. And then he put his teaching experience, and he had been in the military for, I think, more than, just a standard 4-year term. So he had experience, professional experience in the military, perhaps leading projects or something. So he put that under his professional experience. And then he had his awards and he had service. And I want you to also be thinking about service as something that can go on to your CVs, professional service. And that could be to a student chapter of a professional organization that you may be in. Being a journal reviewer is another thing that you can do, even as a graduate student. You can ask your graduate advisor if you could possibly, review some papers, maybe that he or she has received. So those are kind of typical areas that professors have to do, or services that professors do as part of their job requirement. And boy, my mouse is not working today. Here we go. But you can start those as grad students. All right, so other possible content would be, and I think one of them said that, conference presentations. So this is something you may all have done already, or you will be thinking about starting to do soon. Invited talks. You should all think about joining the student chapter of your professional group and getting involved, not just as a member, but actually doing something. References, as I said, we usually don't see. This is a pretty clean, fairly easy to read CV. So it does have his address, but I don't think you really need that. You can, and in fact, you can run all of your contact information in one line under your name. Education, yeah, you can put the expected date that you think you'll get your PhD. And then for your other previous degrees, you can put the month and year that you received the degree, okay? We don't need to know the whole duration. We only need to know when you ended it, okay? And then this one, he's got research, and then he goes into skills. And I think that's kind of interesting because that's not what I would typically advise. But I do want you to notice on his, actually it could be her, Corey, it's broken into laboratory, hardware, and software skills. You could also put language under that as a bottom category if you wanted to include language skills. And do use bullet points. I want to give you some advice from my own perspective, and having been a grad student as well. I know I don't think I updated my CV every semester, and I think that's an important thing to do, because, and now I update it once a year because I have to update it for, you know, for personnel, or, you know, and every year I need to go back and remember what I did during the year. So I keep a record, you know, I have like a date book. Maybe some of you do that, you know, actually on your computer, but I do it on my computer and in writing to keep a list of things that I've done during the year. So every semester, look at your CV at the end of the semester and add anything new that has happened. And then I didn't do this either, and nobody suggested it to me, but I think it's a very good idea to set up an appointment with your advisor at least once a year and ask where there are some gaps in your CV. Go over the CV with him or her and say, okay, Professor X, you know that I want to be a professor when I get my PhD. Looking at my CV right now, what should I be doing to have a strong CV in another 3 years when I want to go on the job market? And get that person's advice, okay? Professors, your mentors are supposed to do this, but I don't think, you know, they're so busy, I think they sometimes forget. So if they're not forthcoming and saying, Abigail, you need to come in and, you know, we're going to talk about your CV, you be proactive and make an appointment, okay?